Hello, and welcome to another installment of SCOD History of Philosophy, Modern Historic Theories. Today we're going to talk about the French Revolution, and this will tie into some other SCOD talks, maybe one that I'm going to do with Andy called about rebellion in general. So this is the French Revolution. Viva la Révolution. Poor versus rich, but also the origins of left versus right, and populism. And this will tie into modern history, current events with yellow vests in 2019, the working class. So this is when the left wing of government or politics becomes populism for the masses, basically. The aisles of their Congress or Parliament, their government, were divided into left and right. The left being the middle class and commoners, and the right being everybody who supported the rich people. So, in the 1780s, French commoners were angry with their ruler, King Louis the 16th, and the way nobles ran their country. Although the government economy was suffering in France, nobles still lived in luxury and paid no taxes. Sound familiar? Meanwhile, the peasants and workers had to pay high taxes relative to what they made, and there was not enough work or income for them because the upper classes were keeping most of the money. And that, the wealth of a nation is its resources, and that includes human labor. So when a small fraction of people control all of the wealth or the resources, it actually does hinder the rest of the population from enjoying the wealth, whether it's natural resources or money or property or utilities, however you want to define wealth. It's all of those things in the case of rebellion within a country. So, and national economics. All right, by 1789, the economy was broken, and the nobles called a meeting with the middle class. The middle class demanded that nobles pay taxes at least, but the nobles refused. This made, of course they would, this made the French masses of commoners furious. A crowd of poor people, helped by soldiers, attacked and captured a large prison called, say it with me, the Bastille. And there's a famous painting called The Storming of the Bastille. After the storming of the Bastille, many other lower classes or subgroups rebelled in other areas. The middle class took control, and most of the nobles were executed in a period known as the Reign of Terror. The military rage needed for the revolution led to years of war campaigns and promoted warmongers like Napoleon, who was not as short as the legends claim. As greed and power was transferred and allowed to remain unchecked by humanitarian ethical philosophies. This is why revolution is never enough, if the natural tendencies of abuse and neglect are not addressed. There will always be flaws within a system, but sometimes the flaws become intolerable, and generationally this happens from everything from hairstyles, fashion, music, and the structure of government. Voltaire was primarily influential, so Voltaire saw himself as a dramatic writer. He did not call himself an economist, but he did understand that France was flooded by debt financing. Wow, debt financing in, 1780s. Yep. The French monarchy covered its exposure by manipulating inflation, insider bank deals, lowering wages, oh my gosh, and raising taxes on the poor, of course, while the cost of living went, which way did it go? Cost of living went up. Yes, it's familiar. Voltaire's base of operations was on the Swiss border, where, as a business entrepreneur, he diversified in agriculture, tanning, ceramics, real estate, textile milling, and watchmaking, an enterprise with hundreds of employees. Voltaire combined laissez-faire economics with state capitalism, dirigiste protectionism, basically. Voltaire was a fan of Adam Smith and wrote about many areas of new economic science. At the same time that he was fighting against civil injustice, Voltaire the businessman was fascinated by the workings of high finance and systems to rectify the mistakes and miscalculations of governments. Voltaire believed that when a government only borrows from its own people, confidence and the circulation of wealth are sufficient to ensure repayment. By lending to itself, the state promises to reimburse its own people, creating a perpetual debt of servitude, which can be renewed periodically. I think bonds are similar to this. Voltaire died in 1778, 2 years after the USA was founded. For all his genius, ironically for many years, Voltaire was no fan of democracy, which, according to Voltaire, quote, propagated the idiocy of the masses, unquote. Yeah, our founding fathers, a lot of them actually agreed with him on that. So, when we talk about what the vision of our founding fathers, we do have to take into account that a lot of them, knew that most humans were stupid and didn't really want commoners controlling the government. Or, their vote having a say in things. Okay. And Voltaire was in favor of the Platonic concept of a philosopher monarch until his noble benefactors disappointed him, afterwards suggesting perhaps, quote, it is better up to us to cultivate our own garden, unquote, after all. All right. Regarding Rousseau's radical writings in France during the Revolution, Voltaire was very critical. Voltaire called the knave's work immature, silly, and sorrowful. Regardless of Voltaire's dislike of Rousseau, the former king of France had considered them both to be his undoing. Rousseau beheaded King Louis, but continued state political violence, which tragically ended up contradicting the Declaration and Constitution Rousseau had helped create, which was more humanist than the former monarchy. It was supposed to be. Again, these are the problems that humans deal with in civilization. Napoleon Bonaparte, 1761 to 1821. Napoleon was the hope of the people after the French Revolution, but he used his army to make himself emperor. Military generals can be geniuses, but the very skills that make them good commanders of killing people make their philosophy horribly dictatorial. And that goes for George Washington as well. And others. Once the rebels get into power, especially if they've been waging warfare, guerrilla warfare, harsh, desperate, violent tactics, yeah, it's a mess. Martial law is in the sophist tradition of might is right, despite any amount of side poetry or propaganda. And, of course, the communist revolution is similar as well. So I hope you enjoyed that. Stay tuned for more industrial Revolution versus Revival Age during the 1800s. Thanks for listening to SCOD Radio, and please show support by participating or helping to fund us on Patreon or in other ways that are organic.